Welcome to the Tie-Dyed Therapist. I'm your host, Richard Killian. And today, my very special guest is Dr. Patricia Selassie, who is a naturopath, and she runs the New Flower Center, right, for naturopathic medicine. And in the interest of full disclosure, I have to mention that I was once a patient of Dr. Selassie's. And so I've known her a very long time, and she's my dear friend, and I'm so glad that you're on my show.
Thank you, Richard. I am so excited to be here. Really happy about it. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And you even dressed the part today.
I really tried. I wanted a more colorful tie-dye, but this is what I came up with.
I like it. I like it a lot. You know, you can't go wrong with black, right?
Right.
Right. And maybe for future interviews, I'm going to have other people wear tie-dye. Maybe
I think you should require it. Yeah.
Yeah, right. It's like the uniform of choice.
Right.
Okay. So one of the reasons I wanted you on my show was because I wanted to talk about naturopathic medicine. I wanted to talk about the differences between that and allopathic medicine. And I think there's a huge segment of the population that really doesn't know the difference and some of the similarities, because you are a trained medical doctor.
Yeah, absolutely. So I went to naturopathic medical school. So at the end of my name, which isn't on my little Zoom thing, but it should say ND, which stands for naturopathic doctor. My father was a medical doctor, so he has MD at the end.
Mm-hmm.
I went to a 4-year post-baccalaureate medical school program where we learned all the same basic sciences as allopathic medical doctors, anatomy, cadaver anatomy, biochemistry, physics, physiology, pathology, all the things, all the sciences. But our clinical years are spent really working with clients, not on drugs and surgery. Like, we learn a little bit about drugs and surgery, mostly to have a background and know about interactions between basically natural interventions and drugs. But our interventions include more lifestyle interventions, like, what are you drinking? Water? Are you hydrated? Are you eating foods that benefit your body? What natural, vitamins and mineral supplementation or herbs can we take in order to help your body to heal? We believe the body's inherent ability to heal. Allopathic medicine, sometimes it's more about disease suppression, right? Like, you have pain, how can we stop it? You have cancer, how can we kill it? You have depression, how can we change, your chemicals so you feel happier? Where naturopathic medicine is more about, well, the body will heal itself. What tools does it need to do that? And they're not really the opposites of each other. Like, actually, allopathic medicine and naturopathic medicine can go hand in hand. So, like,
great.
Let's say if you have high blood pressure, you might need to be on an antihypertensive drug because you could be a walking, talking, about to happen heart attack. I mean, quite honestly.
Yeah.
But a naturopathic approach would be like, okay, now that you have high blood pressure, what can we do to have your body try to regulate itself? What kind of diet? There's like different diets out there that are better for someone with heart disease. What is stress a factor, which it always is with high blood pressure. What can we do to do those other things so that your body can control its own pressure while the medicine really controls it? And then you can work with both of us to try to see about maybe reducing. Some people are on 3, 4, 5 antihypertensive medications. What if we did both and we got you on one plus some lifestyle habits? Or, eventually I think the goal is to be well, where you wouldn't need it at all.
Right. So it sounds like a lot of your work has to do with educating the public about how do we take better care of ourselves in general, right? So that we don't have to go to the medicine route all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, one of the principles of naturopathic medicine is docere, which means basically it's like a Latin word for doctor, but it means teacher,
Mhm.
actually. And we really take that to heart. I think that education is the key because, you know, if you're educated about why you want to eat this food versus that food, you're more likely to listen. You know, you're more likely to do it
Yeah,
for yourself, you know,
right.
if you know the reasoning why. So yeah, that's a big part of, you know, I do see clients privately, but I also do like to speak widely, you know, do
Yes,
teaching courses and stuff because there's so many different things we can do to help
mhm,
ourselves.
right. I mean, it's interesting you mentioned that because the first time I met you was as a result of a course you were teaching at the Open Center in New York
Yes,
on skincare, right?
absolutely right.
And how does somebody take care of their skin holistically when there's things like psoriasis and all other kinds of ailments, right? That affect the skin.
Acne, eczema, psoriasis, all of that we talked about.
Hmm. Right. And how important it is to really sort of make sure that you are hydrated and you are eating the right foods and you're staying away from other foods and that kind of thing, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So even though we were talking about skin, I think like allopathic medicine, like your dermatologist might say, like, well, what can we put on top? But as a naturopath, I'm sort of like, what can we put inside? You
Yes.
know?
Yes. Great distinction. Do you find these days that you are consulting more with allopathic doctors in terms of a patient's care? Because you said something about like making the connection, like working side by side.
It doesn't happen that often, but I'll tell you, it is happening more and more than when I
Okay.
first came into practice about, I think it was about 17 years now. When I first
Yeah.
came into practice, there really wasn't any kind of discussion. In
Mm,
fact, I think there was sort of, uh, you know, a negative energy, like what, you know, like sort of like, who do you think you are towards the naturopaths, you know? But now
yeah.
that there's been some education and medical doctors realize that, hey, this is not something like these are not a bunch of quacks trying to, you know, supplant us. Is that the
Hmm.
correct word? They're not trying to take
Yes.
over. They're trying to help us out. Then they really understood, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, even my own parents, you know, my father was a medical doctor, my grandfather, and my mother is a nurse, and my aunts and uncles are doctors, and they were just like, what are you doing? You know what I mean?
Wow. I wasn't aware that you got that kind of feedback.
Yeah, they were not, you know,
Uh-huh.
they were not pleased. They were very concerned. And now they're, you know, now they text me all the time. Have you heard of this mushroom? Have you, you know? So it's great. I definitely
Yeah.
think there's a shift happening in the paradigm.
I'm glad to hear that, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, I know that as a therapist, I'm often asked to consult with a medical doctor about a patient's mental health status, right?
Yeah.
And you know, the sort of the protocol that we take first is like if somebody's really anxious, really depressed, especially depression, you know, we want people to get some blood work done. We want to
Hmm.
make sure we understand what's going on in the body before anything gets prescribed to battle depression.
Yeah.
And I try to talk to people a lot about the fact that medications are just they're one tool of many. You know, we have to tap into as many tools as possible, and hopefully ones that we don't have to take like medicine all the time. You
Right.
know, doing other things that could lift um, endorphin levels. You know, doing things that could boost your mood, boost your spirits, so that you could overcome some of this stuff that people go through.
Yeah. Most definitely.
You know, and I think that, you know, naturopathic ways also lend itself to that in terms of mental health.
Yeah, we have, I'm not remembering the name of the model right now, but we have this model that we follow where it's like you go with the lowest intervention first,
Hmm.
work your way up the rung until you get a change, you know? But
Yeah,
I
it's
think,
like a pyramid, right?
yeah, and that's the thing. I think we talk about it being a ladder, but I think you're right. It's more like a pyramid because there's a lot of things you could do baseline
Hmm.
to try to help yourself, and especially with depression, that can be difficult because, when you're depressed, your ambition is sort of not there. But if you can make just a little shift here and a little shift there, like there's a lot you can do before you have to rely on medication.
Hmm.
And if you have to, that's the other thing. If you have to, there's still all these other things that you should try to put into place. So
Yes.
eventually maybe you have a choice where you don't necessarily need to stay on it for the rest of your life.
Right. What I really try to steer people towards is this idea that the medication is only one tool, and that the only way that they're really going to get well is if they start including other things, like therapy, for instance, really talking it through, right? And making sure that they're exercising, making sure that they're eating properly, making sure that their sleep habits are appropriate. There's so many things, like if you make little tweaks along the way, you could really shift a lot of stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the
And
reason I was going to say, so the reason that we do all that, pushing for blood work is because sometimes people have thyroid issues. And if the thyroid is treated properly, the depression often goes away very quickly. Right? So it wasn't a mental health issue, it was a medical issue.
yeah, and that's a really good point because, let's say that person who was depressed gets treated with antidepressants, they're still going to have an underlying thyroid condition. And
Hmm.
that's going to contribute to more than just depression. That can cause weight gain, it can cause high cholesterol, it can make your hair thinner, it can, there's a lot of things that you really wouldn't want,
Hmm.
other than just a depressive disorder.
So can you tell me basically why you think most people seek out a naturopath? Like what's the main reason that you think people come to see you? Do you have any idea?
It's funny because when you ask that question, my first thoughts are like, what are the conditions? I think about what are,
Hmm.
what are the conditions that people see me for? And I get it goes across the board. Most of it is chronic illness,
Hmm.
blood pressure, maybe even depression, thyroid disorder, acne they've had for 10 years. A lot of it is things less acute things and more chronic conditions where they've maybe tried different things and not had help. But I honestly think that a lot of times people want a naturopath isn't necessarily for the condition, but they want support in going another path. They
Okay.
want support in, maybe it's just even like a cheerleader, like you can do
Yeah.
it, you can make those changes in your diet, or because a lot of the people that come to see me, they're savvy, they're educated individuals, they know a thing
Hmm.
or two about their body. And they're, most people, not everyone, some people are kind of like, my aunt told me to come here, I have no idea what you do, let's try
Oh,
it. But for the most part, it's people who kind of already, they're educated about what's happening and they're looking for another route and they're looking for that support to get there.
do you feel though that sometimes people come to see you as an alternative because our medical system as it is maybe failed them in some way?
Yeah, I don't
Hmm.
like to really harp on it, but I had a patient just yesterday where they were on entirely too much, a very, very high dose of like a cholesterol medication, like the highest dose, and their
Hmm.
cholesterol was more than controlled. It was actually low.
Oh.
And they were in a lot of muscle and joint pain, and that is a major side effect of one of these medications.
Hmm.
And the other thing that was happening is they had specialists. So it's like I'm not sure if it was the primary care physician or the cardiologist who put them on this very high dose statin drug, but they were also seeing a rheumatologist this person
Hmm.
has arthritis, autoimmune type arthritis, And the patient told me that the rheumatologist was like, well, let's try, this other drug, and let's try, let's put you on a steroid, which this patient has been a diabetic for 40 years. So putting someone on a steroid is not a good idea because it controls high blood pressure. And he had no inflammation on his blood work. But because he was in pain, the rheumatologist wanted to keep trying to help him take the pain away. And when I looked at everything, the blood work and the notes from the medical doctor, plus what the rheumatologist had said, plus the cardiologist, and there was even a nephrologist, I was just like, you need to get off of this statin drug. Like, you need to call go find your doctor immediately, and whoever put you on it, ask the cardiologist, ask the PCP. And instead of taking this dose every day for 7 days, they really needed maybe half the dose 3 times a week. I mean, I'm not the medical doctor, so I can't, I cannot take them on or off the drugs, but, I can, and I would have loved to have that doctor actually speak with me, because maybe that doctor has a reason for it, but I could not see actually a reason there. And I knew that if they had gotten off of that, their pain it may be the cause of their pain. And another thing that was happening is they were on this pain medication, but also on a very low dose, like less than half of the normal dose for the kind of pain they were in. And yet they were thinking of adding these very strong, immunosuppressive drugs, where maybe a pain medication would have been much better. But, so that was the initial visit. And I'm thinking, the more I say these things, I would say these things and tried to say it in a very diplomatic way, like, oh, well, you should ask about this and ask about that. And he was really upset.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
aren't they looking at everything the way you're looking at everything, and that's actually not, typical, but it does happen.
Yes.
But mostly I'm not trying to manage medicine. I'm mostly trying to manage, lifestyle. But sometimes because of my education, I can look at something and say, well, here's some lower intervention things that we can try before they bring out these big guns,
Yeah. Well, I don't mean to harp on the medical health system either. I think it's largely overwhelmed.
Well, that's the other thing too.
Right.
Yes, that's why I don't want to harp on them or cause any blame. But these medical doctors, they're allowed, a very short. They're allowed 8 minutes of time with their patients.
Exactly. Right.
Sometimes the medical records aren't. I mean, sometimes it's like you have to click on each test just to see the results of the lab work. That alone would take more than 8 minutes for a medical doctor to click and look at each test, to review all the medications that they've ever been on. The electronic records are supposed to make it easier and simpler, but some of them, it just takes more time to navigate around. There's just, and then the medical doctor has people in the waiting room. There's a lot of issues.
Yes. There's a lot of issues.
Too many specialists.
People don't get nearly the amount of time that they need with a doctor. And it's so easy, especially where, you and I live, for people to fall in the cracks. And, oh, you don't have a cholesterol problem now. Okay, good for you. Right. But you have other problems that I didn't look at because I didn't have time. So yeah, it's a flawed system. And I'm really glad that there's somebody like you seeing people, giving of your time and your training, and really looking over their stuff and asking questions. I think we have to train clients and patients to ask the tough questions and to not just accept whatever they're told. Right? I always like sitting with people in session who ask me why I think the way I think about certain things, or challenge my assumptions on stuff. Because sometimes I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Sometimes I couldn't be more wrong about their family situation or where they're coming from, or a cultural thing that I'm not aware of, right? And so it's an educational process for both the practitioner and the patient in all these cases. And so if we can just sort of open our minds and allow questions to come up, we probably get better results.
Absolutely. And I think that there's something very important to a person's healing journey, which is actually speaking what they've gone through and also being heard.
Hmm.
And that's a really important aspect of healing that I know you certainly provide and that I try to also provide. Um, and that it's never just like, I mean, I think maybe in New York there are some places where, the person comes and talks and the listener doesn't give much feedback, but I think that it is a two-way dialogue, because you need to
Hmm.
know that you're not just heard, but you're also understood. And I also agree, like, I'm not always right, but I want, my patient or client to know that if I'm wrong, I'm open to being told so and educated, so that
Hmm.
they feel understood. That's
That's right.
important to me, and definitely important to someone seeking healing.
Yes, that's right. I mean, you make a great comment about like the ability to simply speak what's going on, right? How many times are we shut down, in life and told, be quiet, don't say what you're really thinking, just, button it down. And to actually be put in a room with somebody and allowed to say, hey, this has been my medical issue. This has been what I struggle with on a day-to-day basis. I've tried all these different treatments. Nothing seems to be working here. What do you think? I
Mhm.
mean, what a wonderful gift, right? To be able
Yeah,
to do that. And
absolutely.
yeah. So have you worked with, we talked a little bit earlier about the connection between mental health and naturopathic medicine, but do you work with counselors at all in terms of people in their mental health, or do you not get that in depth with folks?
Um, I mean, even between you and I, we've referred people back and forth, you know.
Yes, that's
So that's sort of to the extent of how, I have.
because of
I'm certainly there for,
confidentiality, obviously, right?
yeah. And also, like, there's some people where, like, for example, the person I used as an example, where I don't, I, I'm in there in an hour and 15-minute assessment of all their lab work. And he's upset. I think he would really benefit from being able to see a therapist. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Hmm.
I, I've got other. I mean, I'm all for listening, but I also have another agenda, like
Yes.
I talk about food and water and sleep and exercise. You know what I'm saying? So, and I
Hmm.
definitely think that there's a huge mind body connection. And I know we hear this all the time, mind body, but some of us are, maybe more aware of it or not. But I can certainly tell you, if you are not, if your mental health isn't healthy, it's going to manifest, and you can't quite address it or get to it, it almost always will manifest physically.
Yes. Yes.
And especially things like traumas, for example, um, trauma more specifically than even like, a negative attitude, but like a traumatic incident is definitely going to um, affect a body physically, and it needs to be addressed. And sometimes I don't think that I'm the best person to
Hmm.
address that. It would be more of someone like you. So I definitely will encourage that person,
Hmm.
see if they
Well,
therapy or
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think this phrase mind body has become somewhat of a catchphrase, right?
yeah.
It's been sort of a marketing thing. And but yet it's really very real. Like one of the things that I know you work with a lot is sleep. And what I will share with you, since we haven't talked for a while, is that when I had my daughter about 2.5 years ago, I had never been sleep deprived quite like I was with her. And
I'm sorry, I'm laughing, but I guess
oh,
it was for late.
oh man, I mean, Stephen got sleep trained very early on, which was great. Madeline was not so good about that. And I was getting up every 2 hours, every 2 to 3 hours to feed her. And the thing about sleep deprivation that's so subtle is like you're really kind of losing your mind, and you don't know that you're losing your mind, you know? You think you're making all these great decisions and you're just rolling along, and you're not. You just,
Right.
right?
Right. There's this sort of attitude I can get by on, or I have to, I'm raising my children, but I'm also working and, running a business or whatever it is. Like you sort of have to be on. So you kind of just go through life and you're just,
Yeah.
you're not working to full capacity, but you're not totally aware because you just have to, sometimes life is calling you to do and make decisions,
Yeah, it was just a really crazy time. I have to tell you, this went on for a full 9 months after she was born, which
Yeah.
was about 4 months too long, I would have to say, at least. And I was actually sleeping downstairs, not even in the bedroom. I was sleeping downstairs with her. We had a crib down there because I didn't want to disrupt anybody else in the house. And it finally my husband like caught wind of really what was going on, because one night, it must have been like 1 o'clock in the morning, she went off, wanting another bottle. And he came downstairs and he said, you're going to go to bed, and I'm going to take care of this. And see, this is how crazy you think. The first thought I said to him was, are you going to kill her? And he laughed. He says, no, I'm not going to kill her. I'm going to take care of her, and you're going to get some sleep,
Right.
because I just didn't know how else, this was ever going to end,
Yeah. Yeah. And
And
you're a concerned parent. So you're like, you're sort of like,
so anyway, I heard a little bit of crying, and after I passed out, and he had it down. He figured it out, and then we didn't have any more problems, and she started sleeping through the night.
Amazing.
But not only was it sleep deprivation for me, it was sleep deprivation for her.
Yeah.
Right. And so whenever I hear stories about new parents that, don't want to sleep train their baby because, they can't handle the crying, and they feel guilty. Oh, I just share my little sleep deprivation story, and it seems to work. But tell me a little bit about what you do for people that are suffering with sleep issues, because I know that that's a big concern of yours.
Well, I think honestly, the first thing is to make them aware, because a lot of them are like you or like me. I'm
Right.
the mother of 5, and I think I had that same sort of, revelation. Like I think actually it was similar. Like I was sleep deprived, my husband was sleep deprived, and I just noticed him saying things and not even noticing it. Like one time, where both of us are sleepy. Again, we're also downstairs, instead of in our bedrooms, because there's like stuff for the baby there, and it's a little easier close to the kitchen and the bathroom. And my husband was like, even though I was nursing, he was really helping us with one of our particular daughters who was colic, like just maybe she had an upset stomach. We don't really know. But he was just like, okay, I'm going to just go up. Like he was like, okay, don't worry. You can get some sleep. I'm going to take over. I just have to go upstairs and change my Pampers, and I'll be right back. And like, he meant pajamas, you know what I mean? But he was just,
Yeah.
and I just was like, I listened to him. My mouth was like kind of hanging open as I like watched him go up, just so looking so exhausted. And I was just sort of like, how is he going to take over? He doesn't even know what he's saying,
Right.
So first, I think it's also making people aware, because maybe they're not doing silly things like that and saying that they have to change into their Pampers, but they might be doing this thing like, I go to bed at midnight and I get up at 4, or I because I have to, because I'm getting my master's and I work 9 to 5 and I have a child, and they're sort of in this kind of emergency mode, and they're thinking that they don't have time to sleep, but yet they want healing. So sometimes it's like, look, you're going to run yourself into the ground. It's not that hard to do that, but it's harder to be stuck in burnout and try to get
Yeah.
yourself out. So something's got to give, you've got to start prioritizing sleep. So a lot of it is really just letting them know and letting them understand that this is when they heal. Because I think we all, one of our children scrapes their knee and it'll heal, but it's healing. So we think that, if we're banged up, if we're not performing, like we kind of have this idea, like we'll get better. We believe in ourselves. We believe in our ability to heal. But when there's stagnancy and we keep going, like I really try to get it into their heads that, listen, you heal when you sleep, because when you're awake, you're performing at work, you're caring for your children, you're washing the dishes, you're studying for your master's, whatever it is that they're doing, their body's not focused on healing until they're asleep. So a lot of it is, like you said, education. But then there's a ton of things that they can do. Sleeping in a dark room is really huge. I just wrote a blog about that, because you create more sleep hormone.
Yeah.
And
Sleeping without screens on, right?
Right. Leaving the screen, turning the screen off by like a certain time at night, like, the alarm goes off at 8 p.m., just no TV, no screens, no computer, no smartphone, because the blue light will really change the hormones, your sleep hormones. And, just like we put our children to bed, there's sort of like a ritual: get in your PJs, brush your teeth. I'm going to tuck you in and read you a bedtime story. Let's put on the night light and turn the lights down low. We as adults forget that. Like, we might just be like, oh, okay, I'm going to just jump into bed because I'm tired. And then you jump into bed and bing, your eyes are wide open, because you don't have this kind of like, let's calm down. Let's put ourselves to bed. Let's get ready for bed, or I think some people think like, I'm just going to go until I'm exhausted and pass out. But that's not really how the body thinks. The body thinks, whoa, Richard keeps going, like let's create a little stress hormone so that he can, your body's sort of looking out for you. And you have to give it the message. No. The message now is we need to sleep.
Yeah, right. I think you're right about all that ritualistic stuff. It's so vital. It's so important. My son is so hyperactive these days. And I find that I really have to just like put the calmest music on. Lately we've been listening to a lot of, Disney lullaby things, and it's just amazing how it puts him out almost immediately, right? Because he hears the sounds, he hears the notes, the progression of the notes. There's very soft, there's a pattern, there's a melody to it, and he's out.
And it's also a message to his body. His body, his immune system will even hear the note. It'll be like, oh, it's bedtime, So it's also like a cue. It's not even just, it after you've played that music for him every night, it's now become not just relaxing him. It's also now telling his body it's time to rest.
Right.
So that's great.
So a lot of this, I think has to do with really listening to what our bodies are telling us and starting to become more aware. I think, we're in a society where it's go, go, go. We're not paying attention. We don't really pay attention to what our bodies are telling us until we're in real distress.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth? Yeah. Right. I mean, it's like I think our mind will say we have to keep going. But like you said, if a mind that's not rested is not, it's not as cognitively sound as a mind that is rested,
it's taken years, but I am getting better at listening to what's going on. A lot of times I have to take an early train into work. And there was one morning that I got myself up, I got myself to the train station. I was waiting for the train. I felt horrible. I had some sort of bronchial thing going on. And I thought, oh, I'm just going to power through this, right? And the longer I sat there waiting for the train, I thought, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You could do some of this work from home. You do not have to get on that train. Go home.
That's
And
great.
it was the best thing I ever did, in terms of that kind of stuff. But there would be times, I would just power through it because it was what my workplace expected of me. And, after all this COVID stuff, all these things that we've gone through in the last 2 to 3 years, I think people are getting wiser about that. I think people are getting smarter about, hey, I don't feel well. I really do need to stay at home. I don't need to be getting on a subway. I don't need to be getting people sick.
Right.
Or myself more ill, right?
Mhm.
And I can actually do some of this work at home at a more relaxed pace, and it will get done.
Right. And you know what? The world, I'm taking this from my husband. He'll say, and you know what? The world will move on. It's like we
Mhm.
tend to think this like, oh no, if I don't show up, everything's going to go to pieces. And it's not really true. I mean,
Mm-mm.
I think we think if I don't show up, if I don't do this today, if I, but honestly, like the world will move on
Yeah.
with you or not. So you better just like take care of yourself so you can stay in the game.
Mhm. Right.
But yeah. And I think there's something to be said, like it is a different time now. I think that, for me personally, if it was 30 years ago or 25 years ago and I had to power through it, I might. But now it's a post-COVID time, and like
Mhm.
we really know we have to care for ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope that people, whatever lessons they got during COVID, they take with them and they sort of make the most out of that, in terms of their own health.
Yeah, me too.
So, well, listen, our time is nearly up, but I wanted to thank you for this great conversation. I hope we can do it again soon.
Oh, I would love it. I love it. I think we're talking about important things, for
Yeah.
myself even, a reminder to me to sleep better, listen to my body, all of that.
Change your Pampers when you need to.
Exactly.
All right.
Self-care.
All
Okay,
right. So
thank you
thank
so
you very
much.
All right. Take care.